Let's look at what the Justice Department said, which was releasing this memo to the public would be, quote, extraordinarily reckless, but that isn't deterring the president. Do you see this as yet another attempt to try to disrupt the special counsel's investigation? And could that lead down the road to obstruction?
So, absolutely.
If I listen long enough to you, I'd find a way to believe that it's all true.
This is just a partisan hit job, and what's really frightening to me is that what they're trying to do is stop an investigation. They are, in essence, committing almost the act of obstruction of justice themselves.
So the idea that they would release this memo to the public without even giving the source, namely the Department of Justice, an opportunity to review it and determine what fallout could come from that might be potentially dangerous is really, I think part of this broader pattern here of smearing the Department of Justice and the FBI in ways to try and benefit the president, personally and politically.
Now, we should point out that the document in question is not some bipartisan finding of fact from the House Intelligence Committee. It appears it will essentially be something of a press release, possibly just emailed out, perhaps under the letterhead of the Republican House Intelligence Committee membership, chaired, of course, by Congressman Devin Nunes, based on underlying intelligence he himself has not even read. So despite grave concerns from the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, as well as from officials at the Department of Justice, the memo is in all likelihood going to be released. Dr. Wray may resign if it does come out. The president wants it out even though there are concerns that the work of tens of thousands of law enforcement and counterintelligence professionals may be smeared.
Active support and involvement of the President of the United States is committed to releasing to the public a document that the FBI says has grave concerns, contains sufficient omissions of fact as to be effectively a lie, and that the Justice Department describes as the release of as an extraordinarily reckless act.
Strong language. The president's talking about basically corruption at the FBI today, but we oppose the leadership. The workforce is going to look at this and say, this is an attack on our ability to conduct an investigation with integrity. So the FBI people, I'm going to tell you, are ticked. And they're going to be saying, I guarantee it, you think you can push us off this because you can try to intimidate the director? You better think again, Mr. President. You've been around for 13 months. We've been around since 1908. I know how this game is going to be played. We're going to win.
Yeah, you don't want the FBI that angry at you specifically, because they've got information that they...
The goal is to put out a document that will set a narrative that helps the president, and that narrative is the FBI is corrupt, what they're doing is corrupt, the whole investigation is corrupt, Bob Mueller is corrupt, you should bring an end to this investigation. And
the interest wasn't oversight. The interest was a political hit job on the FBI in the service of the president.
There is a rising sense of panic clearly within the White House and as well on the Hill. And as a result, we see a tactic we have often seen in criminal cases where when the facts are increasingly incriminating of the defendant, there's an effort to put the government on trial.
Trying to make a big deal out of nothing to discredit Steele, to discredit the FISA warrant, to discredit the investigation, and none of that daisy chain holds.
What their real goal was, and that was to put out this memo and use it to try to impeach the credibility of our own FBI. Setting a narrative. It's about the defense strategy that says when the facts are really bad against their client, who they view as the president, put the government on trial, and that's what they're trying to do.
And most feel this memo is about, it's to discredit Rob Rosenstein, it's to discredit the FBI, ultimately to discredit the FBI.
That's what I read out of it. The Republicans live in an alternate reality.
Yeah.
They want to turn everything into a personal attack, and they're willing to burn down the national security infrastructure of the United States to do that.
Is that this is about attacking the FBI and Justice Department.
This is counterterrorism. We're talking about protecting American people from another 9/11. We're not talking about traffic lights here. And so when you fool around with that, you're jeopardizing the safety and well-being of the United States. Here you have Congress trying to obstruct the fact-finding process and not doing their jobs and trying to undermine the investigation of Mueller.
Bob Mueller is looking into what Russia did in 2016 and potential criminality, as evidenced by the Papadopoulos plea and the Flynn plea. Congress is looking into what Russia did in 2016, but oh, by the way, it's also, you can do that and also be critical of the use of the dossier and the failure to tell the FISA court all relevant material facts. You can do all three, and that's where I am.
Okay, so this has happened. This is going against strong warnings from his own FBI chief and Justice Department. I want to go straight now to Jeff Zeleny at the White House. Jeff?
Brianna, we are told that President Trump has indeed signed off on the declassification of this House Intelligence Committee memo and has sent word to the House Intelligence Committee that it should be released.
The memo has now been released after the president approved its release today against the wishes of his own appointees running the Justice Department and the FBI. The memo alleges that the FBI abused its use of surveillance powers to monitor then-Trump campaign advisor Carter Page.
And this is an application to a court. So I get that Adam Schiff and others are worried about what's not in my memo. I wish that they were equally concerned about what's not in the FISA application, which is a lot of really important information about the source.
President Trump ramped up his war on the FBI this week, signaling he'll do whatever it takes to discredit the Russia probe.
Republicans in the House Intelligence Committee scored a little bit of an own goal with their much touted, highly hyped release of their own classified memo that they had promised over a period of weeks, they had promised would derail the entire Russia investigation.
Doesn't seem to be anything even that interesting in here or that, sort of compelling in terms of harming Carter Page. 3.5 pages compiled by Nunes' staffers from intelligence reports that Nunes himself never even read, that offer a few cherry-picked and misleading details about intelligence sources used for a warrant request to surveil Trump campaign advisor Carter Page.
And it all broke open Friday when the president declassified that infamous memo from Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee. The president and his allies claim it shows that the FBI wrongly convinced a judge to approve a wiretap against a former campaign advisor, Carter Page, by relying on a dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign and by failing to disclose that funding.
The major complaint centers on the FISA surveillance court warrant obtained back in October of 2016 for ex-Trump foreign policy campaign advisor Carter Page.
Without the dossier, without the Steele dossier that was funded by the DNC and Hillary Clinton's lawyer, that the FBI would have never applied for this FISA warrant for Carter Page. Now, Democrats are disputing that.
Should unverified information be able to be used to spy on an American? Should circular reporting be used to spy on an American?
You just say it wasn't circular reporting if you had read the underlying intelligence.
So a press release or some newspaper article should be able to be used in order to spy on an American. That newspaper article was all based off the information that they already had access to. And what's interesting is nobody is questioning whether some of the information was unverified, right? Nobody's questioning that. Nobody's questioning that there was rumors that were involved in this.
The central claim of their weeks of hype, their whole campaign to release this memo, was that somehow this memo would prove that the dossier of alleged Russian dirt on Trump that was prepared by a former MI6 officer, Christopher Steele, their whole campaign was based around the idea that this memo would prove that the Steele dossier is what led to the whole Russia investigation. Now, the problem with that argument, with having created that expectation around their secret memo, is that their secret memo actually conceded that it was not the Christopher Steele dossier that started the FBI investigation. The FBI had actually started a counterintelligence probe into the Trump campaign's ties with Russia because of what turned out to be well-founded counterintelligence concerns about a particular Trump campaign guy.
Some mixture of FBI partisans, Obama, Clinton people had this Steele dossier, and that launched this investigation. But what we learned in the last paragraph of this memo is the investigation got launched, nothing to do with the Steele dossier. It had to do with this conversation this guy, George Papadopoulos, had with an Australian diplomat in London at a wine bar. And he blabbed, oh, the Russians have this stuff on Hillary Clinton. When the stuff started coming out, as my newspaper reported about a month ago, the Australians went to the Americans and said, hey, what's going on here? And that was the beginning.
You are not saying that it was the sole piece of evidence used to justify these 4 authorizations of the surveillance warrant, are you?
No, it was not the exclusive information relied upon by the FISA court.
Would it have been authorized were it not for that dossier?
No, It would not have been.
How can you say that? Because it was authorized 4 times by separate judges, right?
Right, and the information was in there all 4 times. And the judge doesn't do independent research. So it's up to the Department of Justice to tell the judge, by the way, we have learned that Chris Steele told Bruce Orr that he would do anything to keep President Trump from winning. By the way, we need to let you know Chris Steele's been dismissed as a source for the FBI.
The memo goes on to say, and this is new as well, that there was the initial application in October, and then it was renewed 3 times. This FISA surveillance was renewed for Carter Page 3 times, which is significant because under FISA rules, you have to show each time you go to the judge that the surveillance has elicited important information to show that this person is an agent of a foreign power. That information is not included in here. What exactly came of the surveillance so that the judge continued to renew?
In order to get a FISA warrant, you have to show probable cause that this person is a foreign agent. That has to be approved by a judge. This was approved and then renewed 3 separate times by judges appointed by Republican presidents.
Right. Which I think is a problem, that information that was unverified was used in that application.
But you believe they would have done that based on flimsy information?
That's the question at the heart of all this. Ask the folks at DOJ, and they said there's none of that stuff. They've not been able to prove through other reporting that information was correct. That's unverified information.
It's not great that the FBI apparently didn't tell the courts that where their information came from, that it came from the Steele dossier, and that was funded by the Democrats. You would like to think as part of a normal process, they say, we have this information, this is how we got it. That seems like the way the system should work. But as something that's going to derail the investigation or something that makes the FBI look particularly bad, it really doesn't.
The omission of a material fact is a big deal, and that
we don't know there's an omission of that material fact, though, Hugh. We actually don't know that it's true.
I believe it is fairly. I will rely on the fact they did not say DNC, HRC. They said political, and so I'm going
political
on that
opponent.
Political opponent. If I'm reviewing that, and I tell the Attorney General, by the way, this came from the DNC in the Hillary Clinton campaign, and that's not the memo. We go back and we send it back and put it in.
The memo says that the FISA court should have been told that the dossier was financed by Democrats in Hillary Clinton's campaign. That's relevant information, isn't it?
It is relevant information to alert the FISA court. Is there a political motivation? Was there a political actor involved? And the court was notified a political actor was involved, and that's part of the misleading nature of the FISA application.
Saying the court was told that the dossier was funded by a political actor?
Yes, that there was a political actor behind it.
I know exactly what the footnote says. It took longer to explain it the way they did than if they'd just come right out and said, Hillary Clinton for America and DNC paid for it. But they didn't do that.
But short of that disclosure, you still would have believed this FISA surveillance warrant was justified? I mean, your problem is in the disclosure within the application, but the surveillance itself of this American Carter Page was named in your memo, who was at one point a Trump campaign associate. Was that justified, that surveillance?
We'll never know because the application contained 3 parts. It included the dossier. It included reference to a newspaper article. What I would say to the FBI and DOJ is if you had enough on Carter Page with just him, why did you include something that the National Enquirer might not run? And why did you cite a newspaper article when there's no court in America that allows a newspaper article to be considered as evidence? If you had enough without it, why did you use it? That would be my question to them.
Is it possible that the Republican chairman of the House Intel Committee has been compromised by the Russians? Is it possible that they actually have a Russian agent running the House Intel Committee on the Republican side?
I hope that's not the case, and I certainly have no information to suggest that it is.
Still I look to find a reason